Hello, everyone listening to this podcast. This is Stephan Kesting, and this is the Grapworks Radio Podcast. What we're going to do today is we're going to go into a video that I released on one of my two YouTube channels. I have two YouTube channels. There's youtube.com/Stephan Kesting, which is mostly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, grappling, and MMA stuff. And then there's youtube.com/self-defense tutorials, which is more towards the martial arts and self-defense end of things. And it's from that self-defense tutorials channel that we're going to take today's podcast. It comes from a video, a really important video that I called 5 Steps to Make Your Martial Art Techniques Functional in Real Life. But it applies to grappling too. Now, this video is ostensibly about the steps you need to take your martial arts technique, whether it's your wrist grab release or your reverse punch, your leaping, flying monkey fist, and to train it in such a way, in 5 levels of progressive resistance, to make it actually have a chance of being functional in the street. But the same thing applies to Jiu-Jitsu, because in Jiu-Jitsu, people often approach it in a very, very binary context. Okay, here's a move, let's rep it a few times, and now let's do all-out sparring and do every technique that we know. But there are actually steps in between there, which the best people use to make their jiu-jitsu applicable when they're sparring, to learn new techniques and to incorporate them into their repertoire. So, let's get into that video. If you want to see visual examples of the training methods I'm talking about, go search out that video. It's called, again, 5 Steps to Make Your Martial Arts Techniques Functional in Real Life. I think it's a good video. Lots of examples from everything from boxing, stick fighting, to jiu-jitsu, to grappling. And if all you have time for is this podcast, then I hope you enjoy this podcast. Take care, and good luck with your training.
Okay, so in the martial arts you have hundreds, if not thousands of techniques. But how do you take that technique and what training methods do you use to make that a functional technique? How do you go from practicing your punch in the park, in your Tai Chi system, to your kata from Hungar or whatever, and actually making it usable in a real life confrontation? So the key thing here is the level of resistance. The very, very, very basic level, you can think of it almost as shadow boxing, is practicing the move on itself. Kata is practicing the move on itself, right? Maybe you're getting body mechanics down, maybe you're practicing, but what are you actually doing? Well, in those two cases, I'm actually practicing a wrist grab defense. But this applies to anything. This applies to shadow boxing and boxing. You might, shadow box on your own. You might hit the heavy bag to develop power. In stick fighting, you might do solo drills and solo combinations just to become proficient with hitting something with a stick and moving it around, the coordination that you need. In a jiu-jitsu context, you might do shrimping, you might do other solo drills on the ground. And all these drills, all these different ways of training, they are useful. They're necessary, but not sufficient for developing your skills. The next level of training is working with a real-life human being, or simulation, as close as you can to a real-life human being. So we'll bring in Richie Yip as a real-life human being. So earlier, I was practicing my wrist grab defenses. So here, in the application of this move, I'm going to be practicing without very much resistance. He's going to grab, and I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to break that wrist grab, right? I'm coming out through the spot between the thumb and the fingers. Maybe I'm hitting his forearm a little bit with my elbow, and then I'm hitting him with my back fist and cross. Now we're going to do the other side, and I'm going to drop my weight, free my wrist, back fist, and cross, and ding him in the face a little bit. But there's not a lot of resistance there. Working with a partner, but without too much resistance, might be your partner passively holding mitts for you. So you can get used to hitting targets on something like a human being. Or working with a partner, if he's hitting you with a stick, you work on your basic parry and your basic attack back. You're just getting the basic mechanics, but you're not doing it in the air. You're not doing it with an imaginary friend, you're doing it with a real friend. In jiu-jitsu, you might be doing repetitions of a technique from the guard. Techniques are complicated. There are many moving components to a technique, especially some of the more complicated techniques. So you need this basic drilling against very low levels of resistance in order to become proficient. The next level of resistance, the third level of training, is when your partner doesn't just give you the technique. If I'm trying to do this incorrectly, he's not going to let go. Maybe he's even pulling me and trying to push me off balance, and I've got to figure out how to do this against a higher level of simulated resistance. Now we're going to exchange. Here, unless he does it properly, I'm not going to give it to him. This is kind of the level you see it in like the model mugging courses where I'm wearing a giant outfit, a padded outfit, and I come to attack, some woman. Typically it's a female self-defense course. If I'm the big padded attacker, and I've been that big padded attacker, my goal is not to crush the hopes, dreams, and body of that woman. I have been training a little bit longer than her probably. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I used to be younger. The goal is to give some level of resistance. Since I'm not actually wearing full body padding, Richie, please don't knee me in the balls.
Of course.
But I might come at them like this, and then they end up fighting me and somehow getting out and hitting me and kneeing me and yelling and then running away. So my goal there is to simulate increased levels of resistance without actually crushing them. So whether it's a wrist grab or working with focus mitts where your partner is feeding you punches and only giving you brief openings that you have to take advantage of, or take advantage of a small window of opportunity to get their technique off, or grappling if you're not letting the person easily do the technique to you, if I'm actually putting real pressure onto my opponent and seeing if he can deal with that increased pressure, those are all ways to ramp up the intensity, ramp up the realism of the training. So that's the first 3 levels of training. The next one for me is the line in the sand between imaginary martial arts and real martial arts. It's good to do resistance training. It's good if I'm going to be training Richie's wrist grab defense to not just grab here and he can do anything he wants. That doesn't do him any good, it doesn't do me any good. It's good to give him some resistance and actually make him work for it. But the trouble is, it's not live. It's not against a resisting opponent. So what we might do here is situational sparring type drills. This does not mean that I crush smaller, weaker, older people. It means that I'm working and trying to get something off on him at the same time that he's basically trying to get the same thing off on me. So, for example, we might be doing wrist fighting, right? He's trying to get control of my wrist, and I'm going to be trying to get control of his wrist, and we're going to be fighting here. We're limiting it to just wrist grabs, but because it's live, because he's invested in me not simply doing it to him, he's invested in stopping me from doing it to him and doing it back to me, we've just increased the level of intensity. The same idea might apply in boxing. If we're just boxing with the jab, that's the only thing you can use, then that's limiting the number of techniques, that's limiting your number of options, but it's forcing you to focus on landing something against resistance. There are lots of stick fighting and collie drills. For example, this one, we're both grabbing onto a stick and we're trying to strip the other guy's grip. Or in a jiu-jitsu contest, we might be doing a pass the guard drill, where my only goal is to pass the guard and his only goal is to defend the guard. If I pass, then we reset. It's not all out sparring. The final level is more or less all out sparring. If Richie and I are doing full wrestling, he's trying to take me down and I'm trying to take him down, and we're fighting here, we will momentarily, probably end up in wrist control. If I'm fighting him and I'm trying to get whatever I can, but I don't have an answer to deal with his wrist grab on me, I'm gonna lose. This is a serious problem in stand-up wrestling. If we were doing MMA sparring, it would be an even more serious problem if he had both of my wrists, because he could now hit me at will, he could kick me at will, he could take me down at will. So including that wrist grab, those wrist grab defenses, in the context of a more full sparring scenario, that's when you get the most realistic training and the highest level of pressure. The equivalent in boxing would be doing full sparring with all of your punches, your jab, your cross, your body hook, your uppercut. Maybe not at full contact, maybe not at full intensity, but including all those other variables, not just the jab. With the weapons martial arts, it might be doing full contact stick fighting while wearing a mask and wearing gloves and being able to hit anywhere on the body and close and clinch. So let's quickly review those 5 levels. Level 1, essentially kata or solo training. Level 2, working with a human being, but a cooperative human being. Somebody who's trying to help you and just help you develop the basic coordination. Level 3, working against a resisting opponent or a resisting training partner. Not somebody who's trying to crush you, not somebody who's trying to trick you or prevent you from doing it to them, but somebody who's trying to make it a little bit more realistic. Level 4 is contested, where I'm trying to do something to you and you're trying to do something very similar back to me. I'm really trying to armbar you and you're really trying to armbar me. We might not be doing all submissions, we might be just focusing on one submission, one technique, one takedown. Level 5 is including whatever techniques you've drilled in levels 1 to 4 in full sparring, or in as close to full sparring as you can get. If you can progress up through those 5 levels of training for any technique, the odds of you being able to pull it off in a street situation or under pressure in competition are so much higher than if you had just practiced your kata again and again and again 1,000 times like I used to back in the day.